The first splash of water hit the dog's ribs like a slap, and the sound it made was not a bark, not a growl, but a thin, broken whimper that cut through the laughter like a blade. In the bright afternoon sun, surrounded by expensive smiles and raised phones, a frail German shepherd stood trembling inside a small metal cage, its once proud frame bent with age and hunger, its eyes dull with exhaustion. No one noticed the way its ears still tried to lift at certain sounds, or how its paws instinctively shifted as if waiting for a command that never came. To them, it was just a joke. Just entertainment. Just a helpless animal. They had no idea that this dog had once saved lives in war zones, or that somewhere nearby, the man who owed his life to that dog was about to return. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet heroes who are too often forgotten, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be remembered. The gathering had the careless energy of people who had never been told no. The men wore crisp shirts and expensive watches, their laughter loud and sharp, their confidence fed by money and attention. Phones were held up from every angle, recording the moment as water was poured again over the dog's matted fur, soaking its thin body until it shook uncontrollably. Someone had dragged the cage into the open courtyard like a stage prop, turning cruelty into a performance. The dog's name, once spoken with pride and respect, had been replaced by mockery and whistles. Its muscles, once powerful enough to leap walls and track enemies through darkness, now barely held it upright. Every instinct in its aging body told it to endure, to stay still, to survive, even as its heart struggled under the weight of confusion and fear. What no one there knew was that this dog had not always been alone. Years earlier, under a different sun and in a different land, it had run beside a Navy SEAL through dust and fire, its senses sharper than any machine, its loyalty absolute. It had detected explosives before they could tear through convoys, alerted its handler to danger seconds before ambushes, and pulled wounded soldiers toward safety when chaos swallowed the battlefield. That handler was a man named Aaron Cole, and to him, the dog had never been a tool or an asset. It had been family. They had slept in the same dirt, shared the same silence before missions, and trusted each other with their lives. When the war ended for the dog after a blast left it injured and unable to continue service, Aaron had promised it would never be abandoned. But promises made in war sometimes struggle to survive the battles at home. Aaron had left the Navy with scars no one could see and a weight in his chest that never seemed to lift. Transitioning back into civilian life had been harder than any mission. Nightmares came often, jobs fell apart, and money slipped through his fingers faster than he could catch it. When medical bills stacked up and eviction notices arrived, he was forced to make the choice that still haunted him. He entrusted his service dog to a private care facility that claimed to specialize in retired K9s, believing it was temporary, believing he would come back soon. He never imagined neglect, or that paperwork would be lost, ownership questioned, and his dog quietly sold off to someone who saw only novelty, not history. By the time Aaron stabilized his life and returned, the kennel was empty, and his world shattered all over again. Years passed, and guilt became a constant companion. Aaron searched when he could, followed dead ends, and learned to live with the pain of not knowing. He took work as a security consultant, moving from place to place, trying to rebuild something resembling purpose. On the day fate pulled him back toward his past, he was in town for a short contract, walking through a coastal neighborhood known for luxury homes and private parties. He heard laughter first, then the sound of splashing water, and finally a noise that froze him where he stood. It was faint, strained, and familiar in a way that made his breath catch. It was the sound of a dog trying not to cry. As Aaron moved closer, his vision narrowed, his senses sharpening the way they used to before an operation. He saw the cage, the crowd, the phones, and then he saw the dog. Time seemed to fold in on itself. Beneath the grime and the sagging frame, he recognized the stance, the tilt of the head, the way the dog tried to stay steady despite fear. Memories crashed over him in waves, and his chest burned as he pushed through the onlookers. This was not just any dog. This was his partner. His protector. His failure. Rage and grief tangled together inside him, but training held him in check. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He watched, and he waited for the right moment, just like he always had. The men around the cage didn't notice him at first. They were too busy laughing, too focused on capturing content for people who would never know the truth behind the image. One of them poured water again, and the dog flinched, its body finally giving in as it slumped against the metal bars. Something in Aaron broke then. He stepped forward, his presence suddenly heavy, undeniable. The air shifted. People sensed it before they understood it. Conversations slowed. Laughter faded. Eyes turned toward the men whose posture spoke of discipline and control forged in places most of them could never imagine. Aaron moved to the cage and knelt, ignoring the stares, ignoring the whispers. The dog lifted its head weakly, and in that instant, recognition sparked. A tail that hadn't wagged in years twitched once. Then again. The dog's eyes softened, filling with something that looked painfully close to relief. Aaron placed a steady hand against the cage, his voice low and calm, the same tone that had guided the dog through gunfire and smoke. The world seemed to hold its breath. The dog leaned forward as much as its frail body allowed, pressing its head toward the sound it had never forgotten. This was not a trick. This was bond. This was memory. The mood turned quickly. Phones lowered. Smiles vanished. One by one, the men realized this was no harmless joke, no stray animal picked up for amusement. Questions were asked, accusations thrown, but Aaron remained focused on the dog. He checked its condition with careful eyes, noting the protruding ribs, the raw patches on its skin, the way its breathing hitched. Each detail fueled his resolve. When authorities arrived, drawn by the growing tension and reports from uneasy neighbors, the truth unraveled fast. Records surfaced. Serial numbers were traced. The dog's history as a decorated military K-9 came to light, and with it, the shame of what had been done. The men who had laughed stood silent as consequences replaced arrogance. Charges were discussed. Videos that had been meant for entertainment became evidence. But for Aaron, justice was only part of the story. What mattered most was the dog now being carefully lifted from the cage, wrapped in a blanket, and placed into his arms. It was lighter than he remembered, heartbreakingly so, but it relaxed against him with a sigh that felt like forgiveness. In that moment, years of regret loosened their grip, replaced by a fragile hope that maybe not everything lost was gone forever. Recovery was slow and uncertain. The dog, whose name was Rex, required medical care, patience, and love in quantities that tested Aaron's strength. There were setbacks, nights when Rex cried softly in his sleep, days when he refused to eat. Aaron stayed through all of it. He adjusted his life around vet visits and therapy, learning once again how to care for someone who depended on him completely. As Rex grew stronger, so did Aaron. Walks became longer. Tails wagged more often. Neighbors who had heard the story stopped to offer support, to thank the dog they had once unknowingly passed by. The bond that had survived war, loss, and cruelty began to heal. News of what had happened spread beyond the neighborhood, then beyond the town. People were moved not just by the abuse, but by the reunion, by the reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms forever, and sometimes they walk on four legs, quietly fading into the background when their service is done. Donations came in to help with Rex's care. Veterans reached out to Aaron, sharing their own stories of loss and reunion, of promises kept and broken. What had begun as an act of cruelty transformed into a wave of awareness, shining a light on the forgotten lives of retired service animals everywhere. As months passed, Rex never returned to his former strength, but he found peace. He spent afternoons lying in the sun, his head resting against Aaron's boot, listening to the familiar rhythm of a heartbeat he trusted. Aaron often thought about how close he had come to never finding him, how easily Rex could have disappeared without a trace. The thought fueled a new mission. Aaron began advocating for stronger protections for retired military dogs, speaking at events, pushing for accountability, and reminding the world that service does not end when usefulness does. Near the end of Rex's life, on a quiet evening with the sky painted in soft gold, Aaron sat beside him and reflected on the journey that had brought them back together. There were no words needed. The dog's breathing was slow and steady, its eyes calm. It had known fear, loyalty, abandonment, and finally, home again. When Rex passed, it was not in a cage or under cruel laughter, but in the arms of the men who had once trusted him with his life. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel anger, sadness, or hope all at once, please take a moment now to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. Before you go, leave a comment below and tell us what this story made you feel, or share a memory of a loyal animal who changed your life. Because sometimes, the quietest heroes leave the loudest echoes, and kindness, even when delayed, still has the power to save what matters most.